welcome to the premiere of the Sesh presented by Cornfed Coaching. I'm Damien Corrieri, and I'll be here to guide you along as we look to enter the mind of coaches regarding session development. The Sesh will see a 4-year-long project technical difficulties. The Sesh will see a 4-year-old project come to life on a monthly basis, and by collaborating with the guys from Cornfed, Jack Andrews and John Chota, we are able to put a multiplier on our connections and bring you high-level guests that will challenge us all to look at session development and perhaps through different lenses. So we hope you'll enjoy the first Sesh. Today we are delighted to have Ross Moffat with us. Ross is a graduate of Grandview University who went on to receive a master's degree from Drake University in mental health counseling. At the same time, Ross started his coaching career here in Central Iowa, most recently serving as the Executive Director of Operations and Coaching for the West Des Moines Soccer Club. Ross is currently the Director of Player Development for the Iowa Soccer Association and also works for the United States Soccer Federation, both as a licensed instructor and staff coach on the men's Paralympic team. Ross, thanks so much for being here with us today. Hopefully I got everything in there. There was some serious LinkedIn stalking going on, so if anything is wrong, you might want to update that page. It would have been better live. So, Ross, how you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks. I am honored to be here. I didn't realize I was going to be sitting in a room full of high-level soccer experts. I thought it was just going to be me and you, Damo. So thanks for throwing me under the bus right away.
Very welcome.
Hello to everybody on there. A lot of old friends and great people on here. So hello to everybody.
All right, and Maddie, Gary Isles just said so. Maddie Smith is on here. So Ross, I know.
Yeah.
Ross, I know that we spoke a little bit a couple weeks ago about kind of what it is that we were doing to see if you wanted to get involved, and I know that you were involved with Jack and John. I think you were the first one on Cornfed Coaching Podcast, and so there's a little bit.
Yeah, I was. I think it was the very first Cornfed coaching podcast guest. So I don't know what it is that you guys just want to get me on and throw me under the bus and iron out the kinks before you move on to the top level people or what, but I'm happy to be here though. So
only the finest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty cool when good people do cool things. So hopefully I can do it some sort of justice. But I'm judging by not being able to get into the go-to meeting off the get-go, that wasn't a great start. So it can only get better from here. So.
It's all right. That might have been my error. So we'll just move on with that. So no need to assess blame there. So we'll tell you a little bit about the format here. Ross, we have a topic for you, and you'll be developing a full session for us today, live on the webinar with everyone watching, so there's no pressure. While this is going on, we'll encourage viewers to ask questions and interact via the chat. All right, so John will be your moderator there, and he'll get relevant questions and comments to Ross. Feel free to absolutely roast people if you want here. I want to have fun with it and have a good time. As Ross is working on the virtual whiteboard, which you should all be able to see on your screen, Jack will be getting the template built, or the session built into our Sesh template to present at the end of the demonstration. Ross, this is your show. I will jump in when I feel like I've got something relevant to add or ask questions, but otherwise I'll be here to comment and help you if you need to talk something out a bit. So without further delay, I want to get on with it. Ross, the topic today is building out of the back, connecting defensive to middle line. You are up, my man.
Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I think, is I'm not even gonna worry about the Google meeting room, and I'm just gonna bring up the whiteboard. Okay, you guys can all see the whiteboard, right? My cursor is kind of moving around there. Can you guys see that or no? Yeah. Dale, can you see it?
Can you guys see it now?
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Let me see here. Okay, are we on the same one? Just to make sure before I go crazy here.
The green. Is it a green box?
Yeah. Let me draw on it, Damien, and make sure you. Can you guys? Is that working or no?
Yeah. Yeah, we're on the right one.
All right, sweet. Sounds good. Damo, tell me the topic again, please.
Okay, so it's playing out of the back, connecting middle or defensive to middle line.
Okay. Thanks for picking my favorite topic.
You're very welcome.
Okay, right. So I think what I'll do, I think to be fair, the magic in this concept demo, which I love the concept. The magic is not necessarily maybe going to be the final product of my session, whatever I come up with, but maybe in just the process of how I might put it together. And I think for everybody that's going to be slightly different, a different process. It's going to be a unique personal process. So I think maybe my goal here would be to show how I might go about it in the hopes that the audience and whoever gets the opportunity to tune in takes a couple of nuggets away, as opposed to me saying, hey, this is the way that you should do it. I certainly would never put myself in a position to say that there's a right way and a wrong way, because as all you guys that are in the room right now, you know very well that that's not the case. So before I start scribbling on here, I think the first and foremost, we need to consider what is the context. And by context, I mean, you know, what is the level of the player that we're going to be working with? How many players might we have? Maybe other bits and pieces, field space, for example. All of these things, I think, and if you put those into context, that's going to have an impact, or there's going to be implications on the way the session is designed. I'm not going to design the same session for a U12 than I would for the Paralympic adults, for example. That would be different. Sometimes in youth soccer we have a fourth of a field and not half of a field, or whatever the case may be. So I think to frame the session, I think it's good to put it in context first and foremost. So for the purposes of this, most recently I've been coaching a U15 boys ODP team, 2005 boys. I've been coaching Paralympic as well, but I think for the transferability to the audience or relatability to the audience, I think it probably makes sense to go youth realm. So let's just say that this will be for an ODP team, U15 boys, and you know, within Iowa. So you know, some of the stronger, more competent players in Iowa. So I think that's important. Context is important, because you can't just start going designing stuff without considering those variables. I think that would be hopefully fair to say. And then, you know, there's also, you know, the periodization piece in terms of, you know, the tactical periodization and the physical periodization. You know, where are they at within their season? Have we ever worked on this concept before? Are they coming off the back of a weekend? You know, those types of things again would have implications on the session design. So I certainly don't think that it's oh, let me see if I can pull this up. I certainly don't believe that it's as simple as just putting some drills and exercises together. We've got to go global first. We've got to think macro first and consider these pieces. So I'll think maybe if I can type, hopefully you guys can see, but I'll just, all that stuff I just said, let's just call that context. So ODP team, 18 players, hopefully that's okay. And let's say we got a field to work in. I know that that's not always the case, but
give me a field at Sports Iowa, building out of the back. Go.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, that's a good point, Damo, because you know half the year maybe in Iowa or in the northern part of the country, you know, maybe you are in a space where you can only play 6v6. Do you just give up on teaching a concept like playing out the back, or do you find a way to adapt and make it work in that space? For today's purposes, let's say that we're in normal times and we have some space, if that's all right. But yeah. So anyway, that would be context. The next, can you guys see the text on the screen? Yeah. The next piece that I would consider would be, just the identity of the coach. Maybe as I'm typing, I'm getting the other idea that maybe the culture of the program is just as important in here. So for me, if I'm coaching a youth team, I'm thinking through, especially in the ODP program, I'm thinking that this session needs to be developmentally oriented. So I'm feeling as if I need to not worry too much about just preparing them to win a couple of games over the course of the weekend, but really this is a session that hopefully will help them to develop in the long term, that teaches principles that go way beyond just trying to get a result. So I need to consider that. On a personal level, I'm a coach that likes to use reality based kind of training, like learner centered training, if you will, where it looks like the game, where there's actual decisions occurring, where there's a flow and a rhythm, and that the players are being challenged intellectually and cognitively within that, so that when it does come to the game, that the feelings and the flow and the rhythm and the decisions they're making transfers quite readily. I'm not saying that that's the way that you always have to go, but for me, for the purposes of ODP players at this age, I feel from a developmental perspective, and on a personal level, in the way that I like to coach and teach, I want to design a session, hopefully that shows those things, that's developmental, that's game based, that's reality based, and it challenges them intellectually and cognitively, and it allows me to go in and teach within the environment, maybe just to guide and facilitate, instead of being very command style and going in and telling them, this is what I want you to do, when this happens, this is what you do. And that's not necessarily my style. Now, if I'm with the Paralympic guys and we are preparing to play Ireland in the last game of the group stage at the World Cup, and we need to get a draw and we have one day to prepare, maybe that changes. So that, again, that's why I feel that context is important. So yeah, I feel like I'm talking a lot and I haven't drawn anything yet. I'm wary of that, so I'm just going to pause. Is that fair enough so far? Or am I just on a crazy tangent here? And I'm just wanting to show the building blocks of my process before I start putting the actual design down.
Yeah, no, I think it's been good to give the context. And to be fair, I was probably in the future was thinking about throwing those types of situations into the mix, like saying you're going to have a 13U team that's, mid-level team on half a field. So it's definitely something that we need to take into consideration.
Okay, good. Yeah, I guess that's the advantage of going first. You get kind of a blank canvas. So okay, so that's where I'm at. So far, yeah. Oh, so you guys, can you not see my writing on the screen? It doesn't look like it's showing up in here.
Yeah, Ross, I just made you a presenter, so why don't you just share your screen?
Okay.
So that way we don't have to mess around with anything.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, yeah, can you see the writing on the side now? Okay. Let me move these boxes around a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so context, coach identity, and culture, and then after that, for me, why is this not working now? It's going to be a little messy, but you guys will get the idea. After that, we're talking about maybe style of play, maybe game model, depending on who you're working with. So again, before I start throwing something together, what's the context? What's the culture like? Who am I as a coach? How do I like to coach? And then getting a little more granular as we go. What is the style of play, overarching game model? So for me, with ODP players, I'm gonna play almost always a possession-oriented style of game, and so I am going to try to help them to build through the thirds. You know, especially this topic, connecting the back to the middle. Yeah, I'm definitely going to encourage them to find ways to play through the thirds with purpose. So that ties into my bigger game model. Do I want them to, and generally I want them to be able to play in the attacking half and possess the attacking half. So tying it to this topic, maybe I want to find a way to efficiently get out of that back third into the middle third. So let me start building something, and then Demo and anybody else, you guys are free to chime in. Obviously, this is a little bit of a different situation, so I appreciate you bearing with me, but let me see if I can. Okay, so for me, I would usually begin the session almost, I don't know how this is going to go, but hopefully the diagrams are good enough to at least show the idea, even though we might need someone to clean it up to make it a little more presentable. So let's say
we got a Jack for that, so we're good to go.
Okay, brilliant. So let's just say this is like the half of a field. For me, I would probably start building my session from the final game, just because I feel like we need to have an understanding of what it's going to look like when it gets as close to the real game as possible, so that we can then reverse engineer and work towards that. So for me, that would be a 9v9 game if I've got 18 players. And then I have to start considering, okay, I want to possess through the thirds. That's kind of going to be my style of play. How am I going to connect the middle line to the back line? I need to start figuring that out. So where does that happen? So maybe like old school, like e-license stuff, where we had the 5 Ws, that I still use that. So for me, first and foremost, after I've gone through the layers of context, culture, style of play, and game model, then I'm going to start moving to the 5 Ws. So first and foremost, where is this going to occur? Most likely, if you want to call it zones or area of the field or whatever you want to call it, for me, if I'm connecting the back line to the middle line, or the back line to the midfield line, that's going to be in the defensive third, connecting it to the middle third, most likely. There could probably be some conversation there, but that's what I'm going to go with, just so we can keep things moving along. So who does that involve? I'm going to move from my where to my who. So I certainly need a back line. I certainly need a goalkeeper. For me, that's kind of a non-negotiable. I don't feel like we can really work on building out the back truly, especially at the bigger game, without a goalie. I'm going to throw a 6 in there. Actually, I'm going to move that a little higher. So again, don't read into too much where I'm putting these guys, because I'm honestly just kind of figuring out the system a little bit, but you get the idea. So for me, so what do we have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I'll probably put a 9 in there as well. So I've got my 2 lines, defensive. We've got my goalkeeper obviously, and then I've got the defensive line. I've got the midfield line. I've got a 9 up there as well, just to give it some natural depth. And then, you know, you always have these cost benefit analysis decisions, don't you, when you're designing sessions? So obviously right now I don't have a 7 and 11. You know, would it be more natural to have that? Yes. For purposes of my topic, I want to focus on connecting these guys to these guys. So for right now, my trade-off is going to be, I'm not going to have a 7 and 11. I'm just going to have the midfield line and the back line and the midfield line, and then there might be implications with that, but let's build it out and see what happens. So for me, I'm going to kind of just do this messy, but that's not going to work. Let me see. For me, we probably, if we have a full field, this would probably be a little bigger than just one half. We certainly don't always have that luxury. And then there would be a goal here. So this team's kind of in a 4-3-1. How am I gonna? I need an opposition now. So obviously we'll do that. We'll just do that quickly to keep things ticking along. Can I put these in red? Hopefully.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, there you go.
There you go. All right, I'll just do the little X's. So, oops, sorry. I'm gonna put. So I'll talk you through this in a minute once I've drawn these guys. Again, don't read into exactly where these guys are on the field. We can discuss that if we need to, but okay, so it's going to be 9. This is my final game. So again, reverse engineering. It's 9v9. I don't know exactly what the yardage would be there, but you get. I mean, that's basically, we're just going to use the field, I think. And so 9v9, 4-3-1 versus 3-2-3. So again, there could be so much debate on this stuff. My feeling is, if we play with these guys with a back three, more than likely we're going to have to find a way to try and find the key player in here. If it's a 3v2 in there naturally, these wide areas are going to become, without a 7-11, these wide areas are going to be hard to penetrate through. So hopefully maybe that just naturally causes the game to be forced into these central areas, and then we get to a point where we're trying to find those types of passes to connect the midfield line and the back line. So again, just kind of drawing this up as we go, but that would be my final game, I think. And so when I get to the final game, I'm on a personal level, I'm hoping that most of the teaching and learning has occurred, and then we're playing this game, and I'm more in a spot where I'm observing to see if the principles and the concepts that we've been teaching since minute 1 are occurring. Obviously, if they're not, then I need to reflect and look at my session and figure out, why the environment I created wasn't effective. If it is occurring, great. If it's somewhere in between, maybe I still do a little bit of teaching in here. But for me, you're going to probably, hopefully, carve out about 30 minutes of a 90-minute session to play. So again, if let's just say the session is going to be 4 exercises, 4 parts to it. That's how I would probably get to the last part, and then I would work backwards from there, certainly to the next exercise. So yeah. So I'm gonna. Is there any questions or anything at this point?
I think Adrian, you have a question, right? So if you wanna jump in, that's fine.
Sure. Yeah. Ross, just a quick question for you on this one. What's your thoughts on putting any constraints to either team on here to try and get your context and your principles out?
Yeah, fantastic. That's a brilliant question, Adrian. My hope would be by the end of the session, maybe not necessarily at the beginning of this phase, but certainly by the end of the session, my hope would be that I'm able to remove any constraints or conditions, and the game's just flowing completely as close to the game as possible. But I certainly take your point, and I suppose some of that would be dependent on how the first 3 phases have gone. But if I felt there was a need to put certain constraints on, in terms of maybe a zone to prevent too much, unrealistic pressing, for example. And I certainly don't want it to be 5 versus 4 and the guys, it's unrealistic and they can't get out. So if there needs to be some conditions there to make things, I would only put conditions on if it helps it be more realistic to the 11v11 game, if that makes sense. So I guess my answer is I don't know, because it would depend on how the other 3 have gone. My goal by the end would be certainly to just have it without any sort of constraints. But yeah, that's a good question and something we need to consider. And I think that's why the observation piece is so important when we're coaching, because we do get very excited to teach everything we know and all the cool coaching points that we've managed to throw down on our lesson plan. And sometimes we need to take a step back and just watch, and how is the actual organization of the exercise? Is are the things occurring that we want to occur? And if not, do we need to adjust our environment somewhat? So yeah, hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to see your thoughts on it. I mean, obviously worked with US soccer on coaching courses with yourself. I mean, there is some restrictions of constraints that we put on, but I think sometimes they are needed to make sure that we still get our principles out, for both teams as well. So, and I think you're 100% right, that you're hoping to get them out earlier in your stage, but you still may to add them into your fourth stage and final game. So I think people need to realize that can still be added. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So I think what I'll do then, because just to tie into your question, Adrian, I think what I'll do is I'll try and work backwards and now design what would be the third of my 4 exercises, and then within that I'll try to include some potential constraints that may flow into the final game as well, but that might just give people that are tuning in an idea of what that might look like. So to design my third exercise, I would honestly work backwards from this and not even change it all that much. So I've got 9v9 right now. I'm actually going to try, if I can, to just draw on the 9v9 that I already drew, and that might even show people, how simple it can be to progress an exercise. So I would, something I learned from Stuart Sharp in building out the back sessions. Actually, let's make that black. Stuart Sharp is the Paralympic head coach. When we do plan out the back, he likes to, oh my goodness me, bear with me guys. He likes to kind of cut these parts of the field off just to funnel the play, so that we're not wasting time playing in these areas, because once we're in these zones, for me, that's not comfortable possession and the player behavior is going to change. So just to keep it, I would probably just manipulate my field a little bit to cut that off.
So you're playing the
actually
edge of the 18 just on a little angle there is completely dead space.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, and my line might have been a little high, but I just don't. Yeah, just to try and keep the game in the area that I feel the concept is going to occur, or the topic or the theme or whatever words you want to use. I would, let me see if I can just erase this maybe. Oh, that's not going to be good. So what I would do is probably take this goal away. I don't know how I can do that without making a big mess. But just to give you guys an idea. What's that?
There's an eraser tool. But or you could just cross it out too.
I think it's gonna make it all white. Anyway, you guys will get.
It looks nice. I like it. It's pretty.
So this is gonna be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It does look like a cloud. So this would probably become 9 versus 8, and I'm literally going to keep in more or less the team shape. We take the big goal away, take that goalie away. He can hang out with this guy, and they can both, you know, he can be part of the focus group, and they can both work on the pieces that they need to work on. So it basically becomes 9 versus 8. My only consideration now is I need to still have, if I don't have a big goal and a goalie up there, I probably still need, I need somewhere for them to go. I don't believe that you can teach a concept such as this without a direction. So, oh my goodness. So I'll probably put, you know, a couple of goals here. And then I may even put the 9 all the way up here just to keep these guys accountable. I don't know how I can get rid of that. Does that go? Yes, there we go. And so, yeah, just basically this becomes, I don't know what you would call this, a formatted game or a functional game, but it'll be basically 9 versus 8. They're going to try to play out through the midfield, but get to these goals. Obviously, if the Reds win it back, they're just going to go to goal. So it's still very, you know, they'll still transition. My focus is on when we have comfortable possession. That's really where the focus of my information is going to be. But I don't believe that I can teach that. I don't believe I can teach the principles within that without having the positive and the negative transition and the rhythm of the game, because that really affects the player behavior. So I'm going to keep this as close to a real game as I can. The focus of my teaching will be on the back line and the middle line. We'll keep the 9 in here just to keep these guys accountable and hopefully, you know, force this guy back to play in behind them. I may even make this a zone as well. So to answer Adrian's question about constraints, again, I'm not sure I would do this, but something that might work, for example, is making this a zone where the centre back and the 9,
or like a 1v1 in that zone.
Yeah, it might be like a 1v1. The issue that would be more concerned about with this topic would be kind of in here, because what we don't want is all of these guys just going up here and creating this unrealistic situation where we're outnumbered and we can't play out. Because what I would expect my team to do, if my goalie was in that situation and there was no way to create a free player, I would expect him just to go over that block and play into these pockets where the 7 and 11 would be. So maybe what I would do is create a zone. Again, this is this is rough, but maybe I would say, okay, only the front 3 and 1 more midfielder can enter that zone to press, just to give us a little more structure. And again, hopefully that answers what Adrian was getting at, where sometimes you've got to put a constraint in to keep it realistic, because in the real game, and this is something I've fluctuated between as I've kind of evolved as a coach. I used to do things like this, then I was like, that wouldn't happen in a game. Now I'm back at the point where it's like, well, if you don't have it, all those guys wouldn't press in a game either. So it's just manipulating it to make sure it looks realistic, and that hopefully the theme that you want to teach will occur naturally.
Well, if you did those zones, and I'm taking your graphic for what it shows, would the 6 be able to go into that middle zone? Are you going to give the 6 the flexibility to go?
Yeah, absolutely. I probably wouldn't. I wouldn't limit these guys at all, because realistically, if we're trying to connect these lines, for me, actually, maybe we can use a little arrow. How about that? I'm like Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher over here. These guys, you know, we're going to want those guys to get in there at some point. They're going to actually probably, for me, again, personal opinion and depending on model of play and stuff, but for me, we probably want those guys to connect with the midfield line in order to, that's part of the strategy here. And then as the ball advances, yeah, absolutely, the 6 is going to have to advance up the field at some point as well. So, so for
or
me,
potentially have the flexibility to check back into space if they were in the middle zone.
Yeah. So the zones are there as a guide and to prevent things that are unnatural, but I certainly don't like it when you see a player that in a game would go beyond the zone and then they get stuck. That doesn't make sense. So I think those guys would be free to move in between.
So what do you think? What are you doing now? You're at third stage. Are you manipulating any starting positions on restarts or anything like that at this stage, or are you just letting it naturally flow and limiting that to your second stage when you're going to end that?
Yeah. So say that question for me one more time, Demo.
Just your restart. So if the ball goes out of bounds, are we taking throw-ins and all natural restarts, or are you still kind of trying to manipulate it a little bit at this stage of the game?
Okay, great question. Yeah. So for me, again, just my coaching style. I'm learner-centered, and what I mean by that is I want the challenges to occur naturally and see if the players can solve it on their own, and if not, guide them to help solve it. So yes, for the most part, I would allow for throw-ins, maybe even goal kicks. You might manipulate it at some point and restart the ball somewhere else. For me, I might even just give the ball to the red team,
Right.
and allow them to attack. And then if we win the ball back, okay, do we what happens in that transitional moment?
Yeah.
And again, I think the information that I would give would be on when we have comfortable possession, but also when we win the ball back, okay, what are the actions that are going to occur there? One, can we go forward right away maybe before the other team is allowed to press or get a shape? Two, if we don't have comfortable possession, how do we reset? How do we circulate so that we do have comfortable possession? And then we move into that phase of the game and start talking about what we do in there. So for me, yeah, obviously the coach can have some. If the coach isn't seeing what he wants, you can manipulate a little bit for them. But for the most part, I want it to feel natural, and that might mean the other teams get the ball. That might mean we don't have great possession. We have possession, but not great possession, because that might be different. Throw-ins, goal kicks, etc. So yeah, that's a good question.
So how do you get to here? What's your second stage or second activity like?
So what for me, do you know what I might do? I think. So how do I get to here? Is a great question. So I would.
Yeah.
You know what I think I would do? I think I would actually, in my own personal process, I think I would go final game, third stage. Is everybody happy with that, or we're good with that? Let's keep it.
That's
tight.
Fine. Hey, Damien, can I just ask a question there, sorry, buddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I really like Stuart's idea of cutting off the from the penalty box. I think he kind of touched on it, what his thoughts and believings were behind that. Could you just reiterate what his thoughts were on that for us, please, Ross?
Yeah, all you're doing is manipulating the dimensions of the field. It basically just makes this zone in here become a bit of a dead zone, just from the perspective of it. Once it's in there, for me, that's not going to be too applicable to our topic of connecting these guys to these guys. Once it's in there, you're probably trying to clear it, or you're trying to maybe survive a little bit or find a different solution. So basically it just means that we get an opportunity to restart the game and get back on topic without spending ball rolling time in areas where it's not relevant. That's all it is. So certainly not, I'm sure there's a lot of debate that could go on with that, because maybe is that not realistic, but it certainly works for us. It just makes the game get pushed back into the areas that we want it to be for teaching purposes, basically.
That could be a restriction. Maybe you lift midway through. Or obviously, you're going to lift it going into the final activity. The game is going to be
Yeah,
most
that
likely
would be
without that restriction. So
that would be the goal, and hopefully you're just imprinting that on the red team's brain, so that when it does get to the final game, they're playing in a way that's realistic to the final game. So yeah, so I think so that would be my third phase. Basically, you also probably Jeff Pill, who was my A license instructor, he was big on having a topic, but then almost having a subtopic or he called it a strategy. So you have okay, the topic is connecting the back line to the middle line, but also we need to figure out how are we going to do that. What's the strategy? Within this central zone here, because we're almost talking defensive third, middle third horizontally, but vertically as well. We've got to consider that. So, what is the strategy? How do we connect these guys to these guys? How do we make that happen? There's lots of ways you can do it. For me, U15 ODP boys, I would really probably focus on, okay, how can we circulate the ball through the back line, through the goalkeeper, until we create these types of passing lanes. And so for me, maybe that's just you've got your topic, but then you've got your strategy, and that might just help to focus your information. So for me, I would be looking for that trending. Okay, are they seeing that? Are they forcing the ball into the midfield too early? Do we need to circulate once, twice, three times before we go into the midfield? And I wouldn't tell them that, but I would have that in my brain and then see how they solve it and how they go from there. So yeah. So okay, let's move on just to keep it ticking. But
yeah,
so that would be my third phase, and we can also go back to the end. I'm just going to scroll that right up. Is that okay?
yeah. If you want to, you could press. Yeah, you could do that, or you could just start a new board. Just hit the plus button on the bottom, so it shows 1 of 1.
Oh, I gotcha. Is that a new board better?
Yeah.
I'll do a new board.
Whatever,
Okay.
whatever you want to do, man. It's your show.
All right, so we've got a final game, we've got a third phase. My own personal process this is where I think this is probably unique or different than what others might do, but I would probably now go to my first phase, because now I know what my end product is. I know what I know what the strategy is. I know what we're trying to achieve. So now for me, it's time to go back to, okay, how do I start building towards that? What are the very basic principles that I want? I call them guiding principles. There's a lot of language out there, but basically, what are the sub principles or the guiding principles? What are the seeds that I need to sow right now? It's getting quite cheesy, but what are the seeds I need to sow right now so that it kind of blossoms into what we're talking about in those the bigger numbers on the bigger field. So I would John Cohn, for you guys that listened to the John Cohn webinar that Iowa Soccer did, he talked about the warm up. He doesn't even call it a warm up anymore. He calls it preparative training, I believe was the term he used. And this is something that I've done for a long time. But he just, he's much smarter than me, so he had that nice phase. But for me, your warm up should, 1, incorporate the ball, 2, have realistic player behaviors that are soccer oriented, and 3, start teaching the topic right away. These ODP guys, I coach them maybe 15, 16 times a year. I don't want to spend 20, 30 minutes doing a warm-up that has got nothing to do with my learning objectives for the day. So I'm going to start trying to plant the seed of right away from minute 1. I would probably do like this is me and not US soccer, but I would probably do a rondo type game. I'm a big fan of rondo games and positional games personally. So again, this would be phase 1. So maybe I would do something. Maybe I'll have my centre back there. let me see. Put it that's right. To maybe do like a midfielder there and a midfielder there, and then I would probably. There's so many ways you could attack this. So this is just one example. Can I change that to red? And then I would just have, probably go. So we would have 5 versus 3, maybe. So this is just a variation on a rondo box. There's a million rondo variations. I like to take basic rondos and try to. I'm not presenting this like it's my idea, by the way. This is what Spanish have been doing for whatever. But I like to take rondo games and try to make them just a little bit positional. So right here we have a centre back, and we have a left back, right back. So we've got that kind of backline arch. You've got your 6 in there, who's going to be really important to the topic, and then we're trying to advance the ball up to the 8. So for me, that sort of ties into the topic. Obviously, these guys are just going to be in there to disrupt and defend, and to make it realistic and challenge them, instead of just doing a basic pattern. Again, could debate on that stuff all day as well. But for me, for ODP players that need to learn, that need to understand how to perceive the situation, for me, you've got to have a live defender. So 5 versus 3, and all they're trying to do is transfer the ball there and back. If the 3 reds win the ball, they're just going to play it to the 5, and then we restart. So, this 5 could also be your goalkeeper. The player actions there are probably similar. With my ODP team, I happen to have Jason Berner, who will often take the goalkeepers for the first part. So, just depends.
Ross, would you? I'm gonna jump in. Would you on the transition phase? So if the red wins the ball, would you adapt that perhaps maybe later on into the warm up and have the 5v3 be in the box and see if you could have a transitional phase if the 5 were to win the ball back rather than just have them play, rather than just have the defensive team just give it back to the attacking team? Would that be a progression, or would that be something you would just do right off the bat? Or
I apologize, Damo. Say that for me again. I apologize.
So you have the 4 outer players, so your 5, 3, 2, and your 8. So they're going to be knocking it about maybe into the 6, back and around.
Yeah.
So your 2 can play to your 8 and whatever.
Yeah.
If the 3 win the ball, so you had said just have them play to the 5.
Win the ball, yeah.
Could you add some type of transition moment for the 5 players and have everyone then come into the box and then play a 5v3, see if the 3 can keep it against the 5, and then and where you have to then expand your shape again and get bigger and see if you could.
Yes, I really like that. I honestly, as I was talking, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, absolutely. I think that would make a lot of sense. If they give the ball away, can they immediately press? Can they get compact and not allow them to play it back to the 5? Yes, I love that. Again, planting the seeds of what it's going to look like later in the session. Right. Absolutely, I think that's a great point, Damo. So you might have to get switch into the hot seat one day and do your own.
No, I'm good, thanks.
That's a good shout, though. I like that. So yeah, basically, it's just a 5v3 rondo. Oh my gosh, rondo, and then
that's very do-tick of you going with different size fonts and stuff.
Yeah. And so what might I teach? So honestly, this is where I love to teach. I prefer this than the big stuff. I don't know why. I find it more enjoyable. I think the players find it more enjoyable, whatever. But so this is, like I said, the seeds of the session. So I'm not worried about positionally and functionally right now. I want to make sure those basic guiding principles are there. So things like body shape, is the 5 receiving it on his back foot to circulate it quickly? Is the 6 receiving it in a way that allows them to play forward to the 8 when they receive the ball, or at least giving themselves the opportunity to play forward? So body orientation, I would probably talk about obviously just like angles and distances, as the pressure gets greater, how do you adjust your angle? Something I like to do is take my guiding principles and then figure out what's a great guided question. So rather than a coaching point, what's a great question I could ask to these guys to help bring that out? So so rather than just saying, hey, you know, Joey, you're playing the six, how can you I'm already asking questions, but just rather than saying I always coach that way, so I can't even do it the other way now. Rather than saying you need to open up, or something like that, I would say, how can you give yourself the best chance of playing forward? You know, might say to the five, as the pressure gets greater on the ball, what does that mean for the angle you need, your angle of support? Things like that. I think this would be a great time to address the little things with the six. He's the key to the whole this, in my opinion. If you're talking about connecting the two lines, he's basically between the two lines, isn't he? So I would probably talk to him about finding gaps in between and in behind. He's kind of already there right now, but finding little those little in between these guys and in behind these guys, so that when we pass, so that when those little entry balls come in, we're actually eliminating defenders. If the five, you know, maybe if the five's there, we're actually playing passes that take the defenders out of the game. A lot of kids want to come to the ball. They get really excited to, you know, to check in. But then once they're there, then they've got three guys to play through. So great, you get the ball, but now you're facing the wrong way, and you've still got a block of three to figure out how to get through. So that might be, I might talk about something like that. And then I would talk to them just about rhythm. So rather than saying, hey, play quicker, play slower, do whatever, I might say, okay, how can we attract, what type of passes attract the defender, so that they start to recognize, okay, these slow, short passes are pulling people in, and then we need to speed it up if we want to penetrate, things like that. But again, not worried about right back, left back, whatever, just ideas, principles that hopefully they'll then be able to take as the session progresses, that still make sense as the numbers and the space gets bigger.
Are you doing
Yeah,
any competition in here? Like what's the competition in here?
for me, that's observable. I wouldn't at first, with just knowing, like the group that I'm imagining, they would just kick the crap out each other if there wasn't a competition, which I love. But if that wasn't there, and I was looking at it, I was like, this doesn't even look real, then maybe yes, maybe I would say, okay, the five get a point every time you transfer successfully from one to the other. Reds, you get a point every time you win the ball back and successfully hit the five. Something maybe like that, and then keep a little score and play for 45 seconds, 60 seconds. And I think with youth players, you can absolutely, you can change those positions. Everybody should, this is a great moment where everybody can do all of the roles. We're still teaching long term, so we don't need to get super position specific, even at U15, in my opinion. Yeah, and then obviously keywords is a big thing that's come into the US methodology. And this is not a method, this is like a hybrid of about 4 different methodologies probably. But keywords is important as well. So the word scanning the sides, probably going to just come out over and over again, to the point where it's almost getting imprinted in their brain. I think that would be, an example of where keywords might come in, almost like little sound bites. You're just hearing, so that they become hopefully ingrained and become a habit.
Ross,
So,
Gary has a question. Would you consider the size and shape of your grid in this activity and how it would impact your topic?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not too much, honestly, no. I'm not gonna. I would probably just make that, like, because I want it to be quick and I want the pressure to be realistic. So I would probably just do honestly, just like a box, like a 15 by 15 box. I know that starts to move away from area of the field and natural dimensions of the field. But for me, that's not my objective right now. I feel like we've got a lot of time later in the session to make it onto the the more real dimensions. So for right now, it's all about creating an environment that brings out those sub principles, if you will, scanning, body shape, things that are important in any concept, any topic, rhythm, tempo, things like that. So I want to be able to just say things like, after you pass the ball there, where do you need to look? How often have you looked away from the ball? I'm more interested in that than saying, okay, as a right back, when this happens, you need to do this. So for me, no, I just want it to be like sharp, enjoyable, fun. So I would keep it tight. I'm guessing a little bit on. I'm not very good with dimensions. I'm guessing about 15 by 15 probably.
Would you allow or have a progression at all to allow for any rotation, especially between the 8 and the 6? So maybe the 8, or is that just getting silly maybe for a warm up? I don't.
So that it becomes a little fluid between these two, and one can go out and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, because you basically, if you're looking to play through, if you were to have the 6 maybe check into kind of where your little mouse like plus sign is, I mean, and then maybe the 8 could check into space.
Yeah, that's a great concept, Damien. Yeah, I'm not against that. I think that's where the cost benefit comes in. Okay, am I making this too complex for the players, and now it just becomes about learning the exercise? So I would do a trade-off decision on that one, and probably figure out, is that going to have the benefit, or do I have enough time later in the session to talk about midfield rotation and leaving space and filling space and stuff like that? So for me, probably, given that this is basically minute 1, I would probably just leave it more rigid just for right now and focus on those other principles. And then as we make it more complex, then I would start to build in information on that. But I think that's a very valid coaching point, and something that needs to come out in the session, whether it's in phase 2 or phase 3. So is that
So
fair?
Yeah, no, great. What does phase 2 look like then for you building
Okay.
off this? Are we getting to like a similar type target game, or are you going into more of a, phase play type activity?
Yes. Well, Demo, that is the thing I haven't figured out yet. And I love that question, because I think this is where the session takes 2 potentially different paths, is on phase 2. So your question is it kind of a progression of this rondo, or do you start to make it a little more functional? It's a really, really good question, and honestly, I don't know for sure. So let me just do this real quick and talk through it. This is going to be real messy, but I'm just going to try and do it. I'm going to do this and then I'm going to think of something better. But
Doesn't that always happen?
I would think, so if I was to progress the rondo, for example, and make a bigger positional game, still just a game, a naturally flowing game, or a continuous game like this. What would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Could maybe even put the 10 in. So you could do like a little zonal game where I love games like this, so I'm maybe just going comfort zone right now. But you could progress to something like this where, sorry. So it would basically be, you guys will get the idea, but so sorry, it's taking forever. All right, so basically what you have is, it's a positional game, it's a rondo, it's kind of a transfer game, just like the other one, except you're building in the more position specific shape. This is a goalkeeper and a 9 here if we're playing up the way. And basically, it just becomes a transfer game. You're trying to go from here to here. And now you've got your back 4 and you've got your midfield line. You're trying to play into your 9, which would kind of naturally move into the final phase. So here's the cost benefit. Well, let me just draw the other one real quick. So let's just say that's a 7v7 plus 2. These guys are in a zone. I'm not going to draw the zone, but you kind of get the idea, just a traditional target game. You still have a front 3 here. Because that will allow me to coach these guys a little bit if I need to. Some of the new A, B license, C license as well, methodology would have you focus on coaching these guys right now in kind of that orientation phase to make sure that they're pressing in a way and the opponent's pressing in a way that's creating the problem that you want to solve. So you could maybe do that a little bit. Again, this is a mix of a bunch of methodologies, but that's something to think about. The other way you could go, and this might tie into your periodization in terms of have they learned this stuff before? How functional do you need to get? Are you trying to solve a problem that you saw at the weekend that needs to be solved? That's where we have to weigh up the variables. So I'm just going to draw, this will hopefully bring us maybe to wrapping up point. But I think this is a good indication of why it's not as simple as just coming up with your exercises. So you could just do you could actually do 2 activities on this one. So let's just say we have, let's do that higher. Dimensions are going to look crazy here. You have your goalie there, and then maybe you just put in 3 guys. So you could just make it like 6 versus 3. It's very functional. If that's the halfway line, you would not even want to go that high. This is maybe what you would have done in an E license, something like this. I don't know why it's red, but let's do it black so it's not too confusing.
So you're talking you're at a 6v3.
Yeah, so it's a 6v3, and then you put.
You're gonna have what, 3 counter goals?
Yeah, and you would just go to counter goals. So I'll just do that real quick to give you the idea. So, all right, so I'm happy with my phase 1. For me, this is cost benefit. Do you progress the rondo idea into a bigger positional game? For me, if it was ODP and we weren't preparing for a game, a specific event, I would probably go on a very personal level towards more of a this, so that I can continue to reiterate and reinforce the principles that we brought out in phase 1, except in a bigger scale. So that would be probably my preference for in this context. Now, if I'm preparing for a state cup game, or there's something immediate that needs addressed, or we're coming off the back of a weekend and I really feel like there's specific roles and responsibilities that need to be addressed, maybe I would go into more of a kind of a functional exercise that's maybe a little more coach centered in terms of learning, rather than the more fluid kind of positional game. So hopefully that gives a little insight into the process. For right now, let's just say it's a regular ODP session, and I just want to make sure that I'm continuing to teach these principles that I believe are so important for long-term development. I would probably go in the direction of something, I did that real quick, but something like this. If I wanted to teach positions, roles, really dial in on the player behaviors of the 6 and the key actions of the 6, maybe I would do something that looked a little bit more like the functional game. So yeah, Jack, is Jack putting an actual session together for it?
Yeah, so we'll just have we'll take some screenshots of everything that we've got. Don't close anything up. We'll get all this into a template. So
Yeah,
Ross,
so yeah, I don't want to sit on the fence. So I think what I'll say is within this specific context, I'll go in this direction, because I feel like all the principles from phase one will occur here, with bigger numbers, and I can start to add in other things like just the reference points of space, opponent, ball. And then the decision making there, and I would just try to bring it closer to game like decisions. But yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of torn on that one, but for purposes of concluding the session and not talking too long, let's just go with a 7v7 plus 2 target game.
cool.
Ross,
I love it.
on that note, Adrian had a good question as you're kind of debating between two different methodologies. He said that you did a fantastic job talking through maybe some different methodologies that you would go to. So how does your methodology change throughout a session? And do you think about the type of methodology that you're going to use as you build a session on paper? Obviously, you're on the spot right now, but as you're constructing it for a training session, do you take that into consideration?
I do. I'm a big believer that every methodology is one way of doing things. Honestly, I wouldn't even be opposed to starting with a 4v4 game, and doing a play practice play type methodology that we do more at the grassroots level of coach education. So for me, and this is a great question actually, Adrian, because this helps to tie everything together from where I was at the beginning. For me, as long as you understand why you're using a certain exercise or a certain methodology or a certain way of getting from A to B, then that's okay. So you need to consider to tie it together, the context, and what's the who am I actually working with, what's the level, if this is a rec team, maybe it's just play, practice, play. So what's the context? Who am I as a coach? How do I like to coach? How do I feel I'm most effective as a coach? Like I said, I prefer those kind of phase one, phase two activities than the bigger stuff. I like the players to try and solve things organically as much as possible. So I would consider that as well. And then the culture, is it going to be better for the players from a learning perspective to learn through one methodology or the other? The answer's not always black and white, so you need to dig a little deeper and think about, okay, where are they at in the learning cycle? What am I trying to achieve out of this session? What's my objective for this session? And maybe this is a little bit open and not jumping to a concrete decision, but I feel like as long as you understand the why and you can tie it to the bigger picture of your context and your style and your game model and your identity as a coach, then I think it's okay to mix and match methodologies from session to session, but then maybe even a little bit within a session. That's completely personal. I understand that other people are tied to certain methodologies, and that's fine too. But for me, it's more important to have a real understanding of what's the need of the player, what's the context, who am I as a coach, and then create the session from there. I've been very fortunate to work within, different methodologies, and so I'm hoping that maybe my experience of 10, 15 years of using different methodologies, I can pick and choose what ones are most appropriate in any specific circumstances. So hopefully I'm not sitting on the fence too much there, but that is genuinely how I feel.
Cool. So you're going with the 7v7 with the 1/9s as your targets, which I like, is nice. So yeah, so I think we've got a session. We'll get it into this. I think did you have a call you needed to get on in like 10 minutes?
It's fine. I'll catch up. Yeah, let's wrap this up properly. It's absolutely fine, honestly.
This is significant.
significant.
Oh, that's good. it's been a good conversation. I think if you chalk up technical difficulties and stuff, we're not quite as long as it is on paper. So I think we're good. Yeah, we'll get that going. Jack, John, you guys got anything before we wrap up, or
No,
no?
I think yeah, it was great walking through. Thanks again to everyone that hopped on and listened, and most importantly, thanks Ross for taking the hot seat, whether it was
Yeah,
unexpected or not.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of things, if it's okay, guys. One is anybody that's in the room right now. Does anybody have questions that they want to answer right now? I'm more than happy to take a couple minutes if there is. If not, I've got one more thing I'd just like to say to wrap up.
Yeah, no, we haven't had anything come through, so.
Okay, I must have just done such a thorough job. Oh, it looks like Adelaide maybe does.
Sorry, I had a question. This is something that I am very interested in because it's how we were taught in the sea life course to have everything be very position specific. But in a lot of the environments I've been in, it's not necessarily clear in a smaller rondo or in anything what the positions are. And I guess my question is, how do you decide which players are in which positions? Is it in the big game? Is it starters, reserves? Is it like a mix?
Yeah, that's a great question. A little bit situational. Where do you coach at, Adelaide?
I'm still playing.
Fantastic.
When I coached last year for NCFC a bit.
Okay, club soccer. Okay, yeah. So it's a little bit situational. So, for example, if this was a youth team, ODP team, I would, and these guys are U15, so they've got a little bit of an idea of where they're migrating to in terms of position, longer term, but certainly not pigeonholed. So with these guys, I would have a little bit of a balance. In the phase 1 and phase 2, I would probably allow them to experience some different roles in terms of the position, especially that first phase rondo. I don't mind if if we want to rotate there. As we progress to the third and fourth phase, I would probably make sure that players are in the positions that I expect them to be playing at the weekend or at the next event, just to make sure that the learning is applicable. Because at the end of the day, really what training is preparing them for the game to see if the learning actually occurs in the game. So if we don't train them in those areas, we can't really expect them to then perform those actions once we get to the game. But it's different. U12s, maybe you let everybody do a little bit of everything. I coached the Paralympic guys in the World Cup in July. We weren't, that's not time for, hey, have a little bit of fun and try this out. That's like, you've got your very specific roles, responsibilities, and we're going to train the heck out of you in that position, in that role and responsibility. So again, I feel like I'm giving these answers that aren't completely black and white, but soccer's just not black and white. I think as long as you can tie it to your context and you understand why. So you'll just need to look at, the team and who you're coaching and what makes the most sense for them. And if you just take a minute to reflect, usually you'll arrive at a pretty solid conclusion on that type of thing. But that's the type of thing that we need to be considering before we just run in and start putting our X's and O's and things like that. So it's a great question.
Yeah, it makes sense. You have to know the players a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Ross, Candace had one, and I don't know if this is what you wanted to end with as well, but what's your post-session reflection process?
Oh, I love that. Yes, if I should probably have a formal process. If I'm fortunate enough to be coaching with an assistant, I can't help myself but go just talk to that assistant immediately. Even though you should probably take a few minutes time and process, I just like to go and be like, what do you think? And sometimes that in-person immediate feedback is very valuable. So I do that if I'm fortunate enough to be coaching with a co-coach or an assistant or something like that. But yeah, I think to Candice's point, and I think what she's getting at is we're so busy, aren't we? I know, John, you're coaching about 8 different teams, so it's very easy just to be done with the session, move on to the next one, move on to the next day, move on to the season. I'm a big believer in writing things down. So for me, the process is the immediate feedback with the coach, my own reflection process, which is usually in the car on the way home, thinking about it. I have a couple of mentors that I will call, even if they're not at the session. Not every single time, but I'll be like, hey, I did this and this didn't really work, and why do you think that is, etc. And they can poke holes in my logic. So I think it's really important that you have people that don't just say that was really good. You need people that will say, I don't think you did that right, or why did you? Not even you didn't do that right, but why did you choose to do that? And almost you have to justify. And then, we don't always have time for this, but if you can write down 2 glows and 2 grows, again, a little bit of a cheesy term, but 2 things you thought went well, 2 things that weren't so good. I mean, you could literally have a little look at the field and do that real quick before your next session starts. You don't need to do a full-scale, thorough evaluation, just a couple of good things, couple of not so good things. If something really didn't work, like if I tried to execute this session and I was like, oh my life, the dimensions are all over the place, or why the heck did I choose to do 7v7 and 6? I'd maybe note that so that I can adjust for the next time. And we're all evolving, we're all growing, we're all making mistakes. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, I think that's excellent to do. I know that self-reflection is kind of like a really big thing right now, which is good. And I think a lot of times we have things in training sessions that don't go well and we don't reflect on them, we just chuck them. And I'm never going to do that activity again. I'm never going to do that training session again because it didn't go perfect. And so I think if you reflect and take time to kind of think and you can change things as you go along, that's valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. The question you need to ask is why didn't that go so well, rather than just chucking it out. So yeah. Anything else, or should we move towards drawing a line under the sesh?
That's session number 1. So yeah, I don't think we got any more questions. So again, I will just wrap up and just saying again, I thank everyone for coming on. Ross, excellent job. We actually have a training session, so we've got something. Jack was working hard, so we've got that. We'll get that out once you approve it, Ross. Yeah, 8. You know what? I was wondering what he was doing the whole time, and that's it. It's got your name on it and everything. I love it. So we'll get that out as soon as Ross signs off on it. And we will get some information out about future events and future coaches that are going to be on. Just again to wrap up, I really think that training sessions are a big part, obviously, of what we do. And I know within U.S. soccer right now, they're talking about the 6 tasks of a coach, which is the leadership, coaching games, coaching sessions, leading the team, leading the player, and managing the performance environment. I always look at coaching to be more, 4 things that I look at. I could turn their 6 into 4. And I think, if you have emotional intelligence, which falls into leadership, if you can manage your performance environment, so it's getting your training session right, your physical training session. So you've got a good session that's well conceived, well designed. You can get there and get it set up properly and be organized. Can you coach within it? So coaching games, coaching sessions. And do you have the emotional intelligence? Having a proper training session set up wise and on paper is 50% of the battle for me. The emotional intelligence part is something that maybe you don't have, but you can gain. That's 75%. So even a mediocre coach with good emotional intelligence skills, a good training session, and a good setup can be an effective coach. And so I think it's super, super important, but it is something that obviously, as you see, hour and 20 minutes to come up with a training session, it takes time. So I really do appreciate everyone's time. And I'm really looking forward to see where this goes. So happy to accept and eager to accept feedback if anyone has via email or anything like that. So, Jack, John, you guys got anything wrapping up? Ross, anything else?
Yeah, no, I will be too. Just to reiterate on the feedback part. Candice made a good point. Your reflection should include the players. I do that usually, but I didn't mention it when I answered that question. That's huge. Use your players. They're your immediate resource.
Have we lost Ross? Ross has muted himself.
Just navigating these weird circumstances right now. I just want to help. So if people want to reach out, call, email, I'm trying to say that as sincerely as possible, because I feel like that's how I can really serve the community right now. So please do not hesitate. And Damo, thank you. Great concept. Thanks for throwing me under the bus. Hopefully I did it justice, and I'm sure you'll get some other brilliant guests, and this will get some momentum.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. And hopefully everyone is staying safe, staying healthy, and we'll hopefully be back on the fields as soon as we can be. All right. Sign off.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.